Yeah, and I remember this conversation coming up my very first no conference in 2009, and it's I think it's been a conversation that goes around and around and around, and inevitably it all comes back to the same conclusion. Somebody says, okay, how many people have dealt with the due on sale, and no hands go up. I mean, it does it happen? Obviously, yes, and it can, but it's extremely rare. So,
I do think it's rare.
Yeah.
But as a lawyer talking to a client, we can't say it will never happen.
Sure, of course.
In real life, it does happen. It has happened.
Yeah.
We have had to deal with it. Heck, twice to me.
Yeah.
One of my stories was, this is back in probably 2013 or 14. I had a house I had bought in 2000. I financed it with a mortgage. I financed 50 houses at the same time with one mortgage company.
Mm-hmm.
They knew exactly what we were doing, but of course that bank or mortgage company sold to mortgage company A, that sold to another company B, and somehow my mortgages wound up with Wells Fargo and Chase. Now, of course, the original lender that I had agreements with, et cetera, everything was great. And this is 15 years later, perfect pay history. Wells Fargo, in the middle of the real estate crash, calls one of my loans due. And I'm talking to this poor young real estate attorney going, what the heck? You only have how many hundreds of thousands of defaulted mortgages, and you're trying to call a fully performing loan due? Are you kidding? Anyway, I've never written my senator before. I was just that close to doing it though. And it doesn't make sense. That's how the common sense this does not exist out there sometimes in the mortgage world.
Absolutely. So we have some questions coming in from our feeds. First was about, if a due on sale is triggered, what is the worst case scenario that you've gone through and how'd you resolve it?
Well, there are some things I talk about on air, some things I don't. I'll just tell you that there are potential ways to navigate getting around that. It does involve putting the property into a trust eventually. It's just that it requires 3 times the paperwork to do that. Because if that comes out, they are going to require you to convey that property back to the original seller and provide evidence of that. And from there, that's when we utilize the trust and some of their mechanisms that help us to navigate that a little bit. And again, there is no 110% guarantee of this anywhere you go. There's not a 110% guarantee of anything that I know about. Mm-hmm. But we've been successful to navigate that the times I've had to deal with it out. Fortunately, it hasn't been that much. And it's just making certain that as investors who buy properties, know what you're doing day one, not day two. Mm-hmm. Make sure your insurance is done right. Make sure your payments are done right. Get things brought current. Don't be stupid. And unfortunately, that's a dangerous word in the investor industry because a lot of investors, they don't pay attention to what they need to be paying attention to.
All right. So now let's say, so you've gone through, you've created this. Let's talk about creating a wrap. How are you doing that? What are some strategies surrounding that?
Oh, wow, guys. So let's take a moment because there are 2 ways to create that wrap, or several ways. And of course, the underlying debt could be where there's an existing mortgage through, let's say, Bank of America, ABC Mortgage, whatever it might be, company out there. Maybe it's your small commercial bank. Maybe it's a private lender. Okay, all that's great. You still do the wraparound loan. Well, what anyone who is going to create a wraparound loan has to know is, first off, what does the SAFE Act say? Well, most states, the SAFE Act says that you will incorporate a residential mortgage loan originator, which is a loan processor, into the equation so that you can provide your wrap buyer the RESPA. And RESPA is the Real Estate Settlement Procedures Act. It's a federal law. And there's some 36 disclosures to be provided to the buyer. I can't do that. Y'all can't do that. We don't want to do it. You let the loan processor do it. And it's just like any traditional mortgage house. And the SAFE Act also says you're supposed to incorporate a knowledgeable real estate attorney into the transaction. But for Texas, most states, you do that on every single deal you do. Texas had a 5 property de minimis rule. It's now 3. But really, it was never more than 3 because you have to comply with RESPA if you do more than 3 transactions in a 12-month period. And keep in mind, guys, we are talking about consumer loans, not commercial loan. The difference is a commercial loan is business purpose, non-owner occupied. Consumer is owner occupied. The whole world gets, exacerbated when we deal with the consumer world, which is what we're really talking about out there. So you've got to understand the basic tenets of the SAFE Act. Then we have this animal called the Dodd-Frank Act that we keep hearing about always, and it does apply to us because we are what they call a small creditor. Unless somebody out there is doing $5 billion a year or more in business, and if you are, you need to call us and talk to us. We'd like to know who you are. We're not a large creditor, so things are a little bit easier. But Dodd-Frank is there to protect the consumer from unscrupulous investors. We know that those guys are out there, unfortunately. And they have 3 levels of Dodd-Frank. They have QM, which is qualified mortgage, and we don't want to be there. That's where the banks live because they're lower interest. The next level is one called high cost, and that is where if you have an existing mortgage on the property, your annual percentage rate or the APR cannot exceed 8.5% over the APOR, which is the annual prime offer rate. Now, rarely does anything get that high. I've seen it a few times when the prime rate was really low, almost 0 out there. You really had to look at that and understand what was going on a little bit.
And is that Texas specific?
No, that's national.
Okay.
Dodd-Frank is national.
But the 8%?
Pardon me?
The 8% over APR, is that?
Yeah, that's national. 8.5% over the APOR. And that's there's an index that comes out every Tuesday that you can look up online.
And will that override usury laws?
Probably not. But usually to a consumer is going to be an 18% interest rate, at least here in Texas.
Right.
Correct. There's some states are 10 and 12. It's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, if you go beyond a 12% rate here in Texas, there's some additional disclosures you need to provide the borrower. That's the RMLO's job to do along the way.
Okay.
And that's just part of the RESPA and here in Texas, the Constitution scenario to do that. The next level of that is one called high price. And if you get to that category, which guys, that's really hard to get there, then you have to have your borrower go online, take a FHA, an FHA course, I believe, you get a certificate. And although I've never done that, I've never even looked at it because I don't ever intend to go that high. But I think the certificate says, hi, I'm an idiot for letting you sell me a house at such a high interest rate. But it's one of those kind of things you want to do to ensure you cover your rear end out there because things can happen. So from there, you understand the levels of Dodd-Frank. The most important thing with Dodd-Frank is what we call the ATR rule, the ability to repay. And that's where the buzzwords are: we as an investor, a seller, must consider and verify the borrower's financial information provided to ensure that they have the ability to repay the loan. In other words, common sense, guys.
Yeah.
If you've got a 35% debt to income ratio, you're probably okay. If you've got a 70% debt to income ratio, you're probably not okay. And I've seen this stuff before.
Yes.
And whatnot. So there's a common sense scenario we have to think about along the way. And it's not hard. And you learn you just don't push the numbers.
But we're running into people, me, Nathan, who are not using RMLOs, not underwriting loans at all, and not servicing notes, which we'll get to. But for those who are watching, what are the penalties, if you take, well, what we're hearing people is they find a property subject to wrap it, which we'll get into what you need to wrap it, but then selling it with 20% down and running up a mortgage note and then walking.
Yep. Well, so first off, as you do that, trying to get my head around this. So first off, under the Dodd-Frank Act, and this gets a little, it's not complicated, but for instance, RESPA says if you do more than 3 transactions in a 12-month period, you're under RESPA. You must provide these disclosures. SAFE Act says if you do 1, you must provide it. So forget that 3 rule, got to do it. But to be under Dodd-Frank, it says you have to do 5 or more more than 5 transactions in a 12-month period. You do less than 5 and you originate the deal, are you okay under Dodd-Frank? The odds are you're probably not under Dodd-Frank. So you may not have to follow those rules per se. But by the way, you may not follow Dodd-Frank, but you're supposed to follow the SAFE Act. Okay. And so it's understanding those kind of things. We recommend and suggest it doesn't matter how many you do, follow these rules and regulations every time. It's how you protect yourself. It's how you protect yourself from yourself, because we all move too fast sometimes. And I don't really know what the penalty is per se, other than the fact that if you go through a foreclosure, could this person come back and say, you knowingly, excuse me, sold me a property, you took my down payment knowing I couldn't afford this house. You did this knowing I was going to default. And so could that really happen? And you can hear that over in your head in front of a judge, right? And there are people out there that do that. I've never seen a lawsuit filed against an investor for something like that per se. But I don't know if that's out there or not. I've never seen that. But the key is just be smart.
So
now let me make
let's
another
back
comment
up.
also.
Yeah.
So